Talking about the consequences of Russia being suspended from the G8, but the Russian economy is already being affected by other things happening with the crisis in Ukraine. Tell us more.
Indeed. Well, the sanctions that we've seen so far have targeted individuals. They've been individual measures, very limited, but there's a continuing fear that any measures taken against the wider economy, which of course is something that's being debated, could have a wider effect. Simply fear of that action, though, has in fact sent investors fleeing from the Russian economy. The Deputy Economy Minister has warned of further capital flight this year as investors take fright over Moscow's alienation. Charlotte Hawkins has the details.
SMP Bank in Moscow, its owners, 2 of the 20 members of Vladimir Putin's inner circle, blacklisted by Washington. It's been less than a week since sanctions on these individuals were introduced, but along with travel bans and asset freezes from the EU, they're already having an effect on the Russian economy. Not directly, according to the Deputy Economy Minister, but worsening international relations are scaring off investors. Fearing tighter sanctions, they're expected to move up to $70 billion of assets out of the country within the first 3 months of this year. That's more than flowed out of Russia in the whole of last year. On top of this, the stock market's fallen by more than 10% this year, and inflation is rising fast. Bad news for a country whose economy was already struggling. After a disappointing growth of just 1.3% last year, now the Economy Ministry is anticipating zero growth for the first quarter of 2014. Not a recession, but it's going to make Russia's target of 2.5% growth this year particularly challenging. This may be just the beginning of Russia's economic woes. G7 leaders say they're ready to enforce coordinated sanctions on targeted sectors if Russia takes further action to destabilise Ukraine.
Well, we're going to look to Brazil next. Stephen, the economy's fallen foul of the ratings agencies.
Yeah, Standard & Poor's has taken a knife to Brazil's credit rating. They've downgraded them to BBB-, which is the lowest investment grade, the lowest grade at which Standard & Poor's would recommend people to invest in the Brazilian economy. It's done so because of weaker growth in the country and also its widening budget deficit. But it's bad news for President Dilma Rousseff running up to those presidential elections due in October of this year. Bad timing for her.
Absolutely. Plenty of news for the markets to be digesting as well.
Yeah, certainly is. A negative lead from Wall Street overnight, not helping things on the Asian markets today. They've all turned into negative territory in the past hour. No huge falls, but the crisis in Ukraine still weighing on investors' minds. Kat, as you know, there are plenty of people who make a living out of advising investing on the markets. One analyst today, the best quote I've seen, saying there's nowhere good to put your money at this point.
Goodness me. Piggy bank then, I guess. Well, let's take a look at some of the companies' news that's floating around today.
Yeah, we're going to start with Disney, which is buying the YouTube channel operator Maker Studios for $500 million. It's a big move for the entertainment giant into the online video site. Maker manages 55,000 channels, generating 5.5 billion views per month for programs including The Care Bears. And the online storage provider Box has filed to sell its shares on the stock market. The company is seeking to raise $250 million with its initial public offering. That's despite recording losses of almost $170 million last year. Box has more than 25 million users globally.
OK, now we keep talking about bitcoins, don't we? And Stephen, a lot of us don't really trust or understand bitcoins. But one investor has actually used them to pay for a real house, not a virtual one, an actual one that you can live in.
Yeah, this is not just kind of fantasy trading on the internet. Bitcoins has been, it's the biggest we know of purchase that's been made with Bitcoin, in fact. An unknown buyer has purchased
it's not a house, it's an umbrella.
this mansion. It's a 2-bedroomed house with its own swimming pool in Bali. On the resort island. It was sold for about 800 bitcoins, so at current value it'd be about $460,000. The biggest reported transaction we know that's been made in Bitcoin to date. Now, of course, Bitcoin's had a lot of problems recently. One of the really big websites that exchanges Bitcoins had gone offline after reporting that hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoins had gone missing. Now, Indonesia is actually one of the countries where Bitcoin is banned, but what they did to work this transaction is they did it in US dollars through the United States to be able to get around those legal rules. But a pretty big purchase for a currency that you certainly don't believe exists, Catherine.
Well, I believe that house exists. That swimming pool looks quite good. I could take a dip in there. Thanks very much for that, Stephen Carroll, who will be going off to mine some bitcoins, I expect.